I will go to a short lecture or speech, and then I'd like to answer questions because I think it's more dynamic. Well, I don't have any whiteboard, so it's some kind of challenge to talk about topology with words, with no with no board to write on it. But why not?
Could you use a pad like that, or is that something like that too small?
What you say?
Alan has.
You mean that?
Something like that with that?
It's very small. To show it to you, it's not so easy. We'll see. We'll see.
Take down that art. There's a lot of extraneous art
Or we could,
on the whiteboards here.
or we could glue the papers together and.
Well, we'll see. We'll see if it's necessary. Yeah. The theme I chose today is due to something that is still very bizarre to me, is the huge discrepancy between the way psychoanalysis is Lacanian psychoanalysis is perceived in the Latin countries and in the USA and UK as well. By Latin countries, I mean mainly France, Belgium, Argentina, Brazil, Peru, Spain, might be Portugal. And it seems that in these countries, a reasonable number of Lacanian analysts have grabbed what Lacan used to say to describe the different discourses in which human beings, subjects are taken, are merged, and that it is extremely difficult for analysts of USA to grab these positions. The result is that psychoanalysis in this country is stuck to the IPA of the IPA conception of psychoanalysis, and in which way? That is a question I try to answer because there are differences, of course, between Lacanian and IPA analysts. But the result is that I pinpoint some impossibilities of or contradictions within the ethics of psychoanalysis. Lacan taught us that human discourses are taken into 4 different schemes that he called Discourse of the Master, Discourse of the University, Discourse of the Hysteric, and Discourse of the Analyst. My thesis is that most of the Lacanian analysts in this country pretend that they occupy the position of the discourse of the analyst when they are in sessions, although they occupy the position of the discourse of the university. That is the main thesis I want to bring here. And again, the reasons explaining this discrepancy is still a mystery to me. To go through, I'll describe briefly the discourse of the master and the discourse of the historic, because I want to emphasize a bit more the discourse of the university and the discourse of the analyst. The discourse of the master is in a way to describe the dialectic between the master and the slave. In this discourse, the agent is the master who owns his slaves. Owning his slaves means indicates the necessity for the master to have slaves. So a master needs slaves. He supposes the existence of slaves. But these slaves are subjects. Even if they are not considered as subjects by the master, they are nonetheless subjects who occupy the position of truth, in the way that although the master owns them, who is subject of the discourse, it is the slave. And the slave, by this position, is owning a knowledge. The knowledge of what the master is doing, the knowledge of how to go through his duties, and the result is the production of objects by these slaves for the benefit of the master. So we have a master which supposes a subject. We have the subject which is presented as having a knowledge by this movement of the exercise of the power of the master, and the result is the production of objects by for the master. Okay. A consequence, and this could be drawn, but nonetheless, it's important to notice that in the discourse of the master, what is lacking to the master is the intelligence of the discourse and the absence of fantasy. He has by exercising the discourse of the master has cut the possibility of fantasies. And it's common in literature that you hear that, and if you've seen 12 Years a Slave, it's shown that the master has no fantasies. Okay, this is for the discourse of the master. I go briefly as well in the discourse of the hysteric. In the discourse of the hysteric, it's as you know how Freud invented psychoanalysis. The agent in this discourse is a subject. She is a subject, and she feels she is authorized to enunciate her discourse because she knows, she has the feeling that she has her object of desire as an expression of her truth. This conjunction between her position of subject and her object of desire put her in the position to claim that she owns the master signifier in a way. And in this way, she's going to compete with the analyst or with lovers. And this signifier supposes the existence of a knowledge. Which knowledge? It is this knowledge that Freud has detected, because it is due to this knowledge that he has built psychoanalysis. The knowledge he has detected in the discourse of the hysteric. And we can as well notice how obsessive guys fit very well with hysteric women, because they always have the feeling that she has the knowledge. Of course, she makes me suffer, but when I try to go further, to overpass my symptoms, it is through her. It is due to her knowledge on me that I can do that. Okay, now let's come to the two main discourses which seems to be very important to me in this curious discrepancy. The discourse of the university is a discourse which has a few aims. I would say that the major aim is to produce a new doctor. The university produces doctors, or masters, or whatever, but doctors is a good scheme. How can that be? The agent in the discourse of the university is the knowledge. The knowledge as state of the art, state of science. The knowledge supposes the existence of a state of the art of the science, of a signifier master again. It is this knowledge is based on these observations of a state of the art. And this signifier is presented by the discourse of the university as an object of desire. That's what I want to grab through my by being a new doctor, and it is due to this object that is supposed the creation of a subject, a new subject. Let's call it the doctor. Before describing a bit more what's in the discourse of the analyst, let's talk about what a science is. Because discourse of the university is based on science. For many centuries, science has been considered as describing the truth. You take Newton, you take Newton described the gravitation as something that is the truth of the movements of the planets. But came an Austrian, British mathematician and philosopher of science, Karl Popper. And Karl Popper put down the basis and the definitions of what a science is and what it is not. Conversely to the inductive reasoning, he described what he called empiric empirical falsification. What is that? It is, he described that in the science, a theory has to be falsified. Falsified does not mean that it's going to be false, but it is that in a science, what is brought forward to the community has to be, must be refutable. Up to the point that if a theory cannot, in principle, be falsified by criticism, it is not a science theory. Therefore, it is one of the elements of a science. It is refutation. A theory could be considered if and only if it is falsifiable. So everything that is not, does not come into the realm of the refutation cannot be considered as a science. Another point is the reproducibility. Science needs to be reproducible. If I publish my discovery in an international journal, I'm supposed to give all the elements of the process I went through for anyone in the community to test what I claim and possibly to refute, okay, to invent a new truth. Therefore, there is some kind of scheme described by Popper, starting with a problematic situation. I construct, I attempt to construct a theory. Then I'm going to try to eliminate the errors, which is the refutation, and through the elimination of these errors, I invent a new solution to the problem. Okay. Okay, what did I want to say? Popper. Okay, that's. I think I forget some things, but it will come back later. Okay, so now before going into the description of the discourse of the analyst, we can ask first, is psychoanalysis a science? First, can I reproduce a session? I cannot reproduce a session. When the session is finished, it's over, and it will never happen again. So I'm not in one of the criteria of science. Then is it refutable? again, it's very easy to answer no. Why? Because when an analysant talks to his analyst, what he says is either true or false, but it is irrefutable. So again, we are not in the structure of a science. So my first question is, why, before describing the discourse of the analyst, why on earth are so many analysts prone to occupy the position of described within a science and within the discourse of the university in the way that they wish to be stamped as doctors or recognized by a knowledge acting as an agent. I am the agent of this knowledge and I recognize that you are an analyst. You are a subject which is an analyst. This is belonging exactly to the structure of the discourse of the university, which is within the domain of science. So now we can enter into what is the discourse of the analyst. What is the agent? The agent in this discourse. The agent, we can say that it is the symptom. The symptom is what is brought by the analysant to the sessions. So this is the agent. It can be an object of desire. It can be a symptom. It can be a symptom. It can be source of jouissance. All these objects are brought forward during the sessions by the analysant to the analyst. Why does the analysant brings these symptoms to the analyst? Because he is supposing that these symptoms possess a knowledge, and that for a long while they presume that it is the analyst who is supposedly having this knowledge about the symptoms of the analysant. This knowledge there is in position of truth for the analysant. Through the process, this process, there is no, let's say it otherwise. The discourse of the analyst presents this knowledge as a subject. This knowledge is not unconnected from a subject. So it is presented as a subject. And what interests the process is how who is this subject who has this symptom? Who is he? And this subject supposes that he has been divided by some kind of signifier, which we can call some traumatism, trauma. The result here is the symptom in this discourse produces what? The symptom is producing an instance, a signifier of the trauma. Okay, so this describes what can happen in the sessions, and I see no space for a doctor. I see no space for someone who has been recognized by owners of a knowledge which would stand in a university. And the funny thing is that it is understood and integrated by not all, far from this, but by many analysts in these Latin countries. And here it is just as if we were saying horrible words. There is, it's how can I say, it's I have the feeling that it's an impossible equation to try to combine together the position of the discourse of the analyst and this discourse of the university. They are incompatible. And what I hear most of the time is that yes, but we do it that way nonetheless. Well, that's about the question I wanted to put forward in front of you, and that's how it is to begin with. And maybe you have want to put questions or whatever, what you think.
Well, I'm wondering about the decision made in America to bring psychoanalysis into the U.S. as a underneath the medical establishment. That's a unique position too, and it may resulted in 70 years of psychoanalysis being practiced only by doctors, psychiatrists. But we've had the unique situation of psychoanalysis being owned by the medical profession for quite some time.
Yes, but it is the same in France. It has been the same in France. And the groups who still function this way are the IPA, and they are a very small minority in France. Although, of course, the history of the fights of Lacan, and in '53 he had to quit the IPA for this reason, due to profane analysis and the duration of sessions and so on and so forth. He had not many followers when he started. But I think he wanted to be to put his practice in according to his theory. That's mainly that. And to give one word about the duration of sessions, he found that there is absolutely no reason to rely on the robot you have on your wrist. It's not this robot called the watch that decides when a session has to be finished. And what he put forward is very important. That one of the best friends of the analyst is the end of the session. What's the use of this? It has to do with the superego, for instance, and superego by definition is extremely strong to anyone. And how? What you say?
To neurotics, anyway.
Who is not neurotics? Do you know people know some?
Psychotics.
Yeah, psychotics. Yeah. Well, they can have superego too sometimes, but nonetheless, it is the best way is to due to the strength of the superego, it is the cut at the end of to finish a session is a very good countermeasure against the power of the superego of the analysant. So it can occur. This invasion of superego can occur after 5 minutes or after 1 hour or half an hour, whatever. But when it flows inside the session, it is it's a good scheme to say, well, we stop today, come next week, or see.
That's an interesting explanation of the cut.
Yeah.
Yeah, I've heard it more discussed as a way of punctuating the speech of the analysis.
Yes. But what do you punctuate? Many use. It can be punctuation of. When there is this process of realizing what is the new subject built at a certain moment of the session, it can be important to stop there and let the person spend a few days with this. I don't think it's only the superego who commands the end of a session, but I mentioned the superego as it is the strongest instance which fights against the analysis. And what word can you say? Oh, you shouldn't think like that way. It's just better to say, well, okay. The words are, I don't see any word that can be used in this way, in this moment. So in 53, and then, mainly in 53, the power of the IPA, I presume, was about the same that it is today in the US, in France. And, but he decided that the ethics of psychoanalysis was not compatible with the IPA. And he said, okay, I split. And then even the IPA had forgotten what Freud used to say about profane analysis, which he had developed after years. What I heard in the previous lecture was as well the fact that it seems nearly impossible in this country to dissociate psychoanalysis from therapy, medical treatment, cure, all these, and they're trying to mix them due to the fact that it might bring you some more health. But if you play tennis, it can bring you some more health. If you go to some practice, whatever, it can be good for you, good for your health and your mental or whatever. And no one tried to say that as it is bringing you some more health, it has to be connected to psychotherapy. No. And psychoanalysis is analysis. We analyze I try to analyze how stupid I am in my life, how stupid I am with my wife, my kids, my boss. Why is it that I have these symptoms on my body? I'm going to try to put words on this. If I'm feeling better, that's good, but it's not mandatory. And therapies it's not mandatory as well. If you've got a terrible cancer, even if you go through medicine and chemotherapy, you might die as well.
Well, to make it through these institutions, you have to negotiate hierarchical structures, which seems to me, and you have to reproduce whatever the knowledge is that these hierarchical structures require of you.
Exactly.
And it's in the institutes, which are the only ways to become analysts, except for those of us who can self-authorize, you're under obligation to go through these procedures.
Sure.
So isn't that, in some way, it's more anonymous to pass a licensing exam? You can do that without going through so many hard. All you have to do is take a test and do what you want and pretend, that you agree with the answer on the test.
But I think it's bad science fiction reference. There's the movie Starship Troopers, came out a while ago. People didn't recognize that was a modernization of Lenny Reagan's staff's will to triumph. But in that world of the future, you don't have to go into the military. That's fine. But you don't get any of the rights of being a citizen. If you want to be a citizen, you have to go through the military. And one of the outcomes of becoming a citizen is you get to vote. But you don't get to vote if you're not a citizen. So it's how do you establish yourself as a subject with rights when you have to go through a brutal indoctrination process that you choose yourself? How not to be overwhelmed by it and swept away by it. And I think that's the issue. It's much easier if they were to come to you and say, we're going to cut your arm off, you would go for it. But if they come to you and say, well, we're going to make a little paper cut here today, and tomorrow we're going to nick you while you shave, and the next day you're going to stub your toe a little bit, and little by little you get it's like back when we were sending rockets, allegedly sending men to the moon. You launch the rocket from Cape Canaveral or Cape Kennedy, depending on your generation, and it gets out of the Earth's gravity well, and you get halfway to the moon and you have to do course corrections. They're not big, but they're significant. Over-adjust, it'll fall into the moon's gravity well, crashing on the surface. We've got 3 dead astronauts, and the Russians have a propaganda field day. Under-adjust, it skips off the moon's gravity well, and you've got 3 dead astronauts. So it's all those little course corrections that don't seem too big here, but carry them out, and they become very significant. How do we become aware and deal with our own deviations? I guess is the question. How do we fight against the indoctrination we have to go through to establish a position where we can attempt to do what we want to do, which is to stand in the position of being taken as somebody's analyst.
I'm not sure there are no solutions to the problem you mentioned, which is a huge problem that I've been, of course, it's a major problem. But one solution is not to belong to such associations who function in the realm of discourse of the university. The other is, in California, I heard that now psychologists own the term of psychoanalyst. It seems that you cannot use the term psychoanalyst if you are not a psychologist. That's what you...
Close. If you have your PhD and you are under the sway of the board of psychology, then the term psychoanalyst is a legislated and regulated term.
If you're not? But if you're not?
Well, it depends. If somebody wants to, they could make a complaint. I don't know what the BBSC's position on the term is. But if you agree to get licensed by the state as a psychologist, then it becomes a regulated term.
Yeah, as a psychologist, but about psychoanalyst is a bit different. But if this is the case, and I believe it seems to be the case in a few states of the USA, it's possible to invent a new term, Lacan analysis or whatever, a term that is not in the text of these stupid license.
But I don't mean the term. I mean that, listen, I guess what we're all experiencing is that these hierarchical institutions don't necessarily work for a lot of us here, and perhaps you as well. But I guess the problem we're facing is delivering a knowledge that isn't delivered under the discourse of the university. and engaging in institutions that provide a vehicle for that, which none of them seem to succeed without coming from this place of the knowledge of the S2 or whatever, that somebody's offering, you're offering the S2 by coming here.
But is it a matter of transmitting a knowledge, of delivering a knowledge, or is it a matter of transmitting experience of psychoanalysis? And I think it is very different. The position of knowledge is very different in the discourse of the university, as it is the agent. It is because I own I own knowledge that I'm going to transmit. I'm going to deliver. Although in the discourse of the analyst, the knowledge is not at this place. The knowledge is what is supposed by the symptom of the patient, of the analysant. It is very different. What do we deliver something? It's what I wish to my action, for instance, if I talk of me, is to what I'm doing now is try to transmit my experience. I don't have the idea I'm transmitting a knowledge. I transmit what I've been through. Why would it be impossible in this country to build an association which would not be hierarchical? You see what I mean? As in France, there are maybe 20 or 30 different associations who work like this. We are not smarter than the people in the US. But I agree with you that it is probably impossible in the existing structures. I think this is the problem that has been faced by Lacan in '53. Say it's impossible with you, IPA, to do something with you. Okay, I'm alone and I do something else, and follow me who wants to follow me.
About just like Jesus.
What actually Jesus said, we don't know really. We know what the church has built 100 years after he died. And this is very different.
But psychoanalysis has its own church.
Yeah, there are some churches. Yeah, sure. But we are not talking about church by now. We are talking about, because in the religion, the position of the discourse is maybe more like the discourse of the historic than the discourse of the analyst, with which we can enter in this, we can think of it. It's not obvious what I'm saying. It's just I'm reasoning while you're talking. Yeah, that's how it is. Don't know what. Yeah.
Well, I have a difficult time thinking of it as a universal. That if the IPA thinks one thing and the IPA acts one way, if it all hinges on this question.
On this?
On the question, if it all turns on the question of whether you're transmitting university knowledge or whether you are transmitting something that formed from an experience, I think it is possible to be part of an IPA organization and have quite an experience. It comes within the context of that particular society, But I don't think that my experience is that it insists that you think one way, or think about doing analysis on the basis of some form or some technology. I do think that there's the insistence that you have an experience as part of your training that becomes usable. So maybe there is an attempt to, people like myself to kind of have it both ways, be part of an institute that can confer this type of social benefit, but also feel not very much like they have to toe any particular line or do something a particular way. I guess I'm questioning the thesis that an IPA institute acts one way.
But they do. But they do. If you want to be stamped as psychoanalyst through the IPA, you are to go through a process which is very well defined by the owners of this institution. You cannot avoid to spend these number of years with one patient, then two, then I don't know exactly how it works, but that's what I heard. So who owns the knowledge? They know better than you, and that is in contradiction with the ethics of psychoanalysis.
I think it's too simple. I mean, there are some requirements.
Yeah, these requirements.
There are requirements.
But who decide these requirements are a necessity? They do.
I have a friend who trained at Alston White in New York City, was considered to be head of the training committee there, moved out here, got affiliated with Pink, was appointed to their training committee at Pink. When Pink went to join the IPA, Pink was told that he could be nowhere near any trainees or any part of the training committee, because when he specified what went on in his analysis, he stated that he only met with his analysts 3 times a week, and by their criteria that was insufficient. He did not have a successful analysis. It should have been at least 4. That's the kind of criteria that's kind of silly. It makes no sense.
There are lots of analysts that came into Pink and they had to go through some process to be conferred as analysts within the IPA structure, but they made, they didn't make, people who had training in other places, they didn't make them make up that extra day, but they did put them through some type of process to have to figure out whether these are people who...
No, that was done just on paper. There was no interview, no process. They looked at his form and they said, well, your analysis is insufficient.
No, but the problem is, on my point of view, simple. Who owns the knowledge? Full stop. If it's my analysand, okay. If it's the dean or the head of an institution, no way. Full stop. Who owns the knowledge? Depending who owns the knowledge, we are in a specific form of discourse.
But you're saying that there's institutions in Latin art that function differently than this, non-hierarchically, non-doctrinally.
Well, it's not perfect, huh?
Right, but I'm so curious, what's different? What are they doing?
Okay, that's a good question. The basis of the work is the cartel. Okay, the cartel is, the basis, of course, is to go through one's personal analysis, of course, first. Then the structure I support is the cartel. you know what the cartel is. Okay, it's a structure with usually 5 people. Duration is no more than 2 years. There are 4 people who decide to discuss a theme, whatever, and they choose a 5th person called the +1. This person belongs or might not belong to the psychoanalysis community, whatever they decide, and they meet usually about once or twice a month, and they decide to elaborate on the theme they have decided to talk about. The role of the +1 is extremely important. For instance, in the case of if the +1 is not analyst, then and not familiar with the terms, he can ask very good questions. Well, you are talking, all the 4 of you, you are talking about the unconscious, but by the way, what is the unconscious? Very good question. That the 4 guys will not put forward because they are accustomed to use the term. But these guys say, hey, what's that? You talk about the real, but the real, what's that? What that? I learned the real in mathematics. I learned the real when I bump in another car. But what do you mean by that? Okay, that's very, very important to have. For instance, a +1 which is in another domain, and therefore there is a process. First, when before you come to to talk to your analyst, you have no one to talk to. You have your friends, your wife, your kids, and it's the structure. I can elaborate on this. The structure does not lead to auto-analysis. Then you learn how to talk to someone you don't know, which is your analyst. And you learn to talk, and after a while you start to talk without being obscene. You have to. Psychoanalysis is a lesson of reserve in a way. You can talk about your asshole, but with reserve. And you can talk about the spot you got on the nose being extremely obscene. See? So you learn how to talk to this person you don't know. So that's one person. Now, when you are in a cartel, you learn to talk to 4 people. And these 4 people have different background, are different subjects, and one of them might be totally in another domain. So you have to. Then, if I talk to you, I know that the 4 others the 3 others are listening to what I'm telling you. So I have to transform what I'm saying using the fact that the 3 others are listening, and that they might understand in a different way. You know, so this structure invents the intersubjectivity, and now one subject is talking to 4. Okay, then the next structure is la passe, the pass. Not the pass, so there are many versions, and the one Lacan invented, he finished by saying that it was a failure. I think la passe is a very important process as well, in the way then you are going to transmit to, if you go into the process of regular pass, if you want, you are going to talk to two different passeurs, to which you are going to explain your analytic process. Or it can be when you try to transmit to other people. For instance, Lacan, who was talking to about 1,000 people in his seminars, said, I never stop passing the pass. And he was saying that when he was talking to his audience, he said that he was putting himself in a position of an analysand, trying to pass to the audience. Okay, this is a brief description of the process that can be ideally existing in these associations. Don't go and have a look too close because it's very different from this. But this is the idea. And through this process, you might have some persons who come to see you and tell you, you are my analyst. And not, I am analyst. No, you are my analyst. It's not an ontology. You cannot really use the verb to be with the substantive analyst. I am psychoanalyst is irrelevant. But to hear someone telling you, well, you know, you are my analyst. Okay, but when he leaves the session, you cease to be a psychoanalyst. You are only an analyst when he says, you are my analyst. Of course, there is no guarantee of competence, but through the IPA or whatever hierarchical process, there are no more guarantee. We can have many examples. Huh? So, in a way, that's how we like to follow the steps drawn by Lacan, you know. And the matter of risk to be sued or trials, or we put forward that we are not curing people. It's not a therapy. Of course, if you go into therapy, you have to use the proper means recognized by your peers, because you are supposed to have a therapeutic action. But there you analyze, just like a philosopher. You can put on placard in front of your house saying, I'm a philosopher, I can receive you, and you can come and talk to me, and we can talk about philosophy or your problems. Can you sue a philosopher? Difficult.
Does that mean that in France there's no relationship between doing psychoanalysis and healthcare, national healthcare?
No, not really. Well, it can be. For instance, I am MD psychiatrist, and I work as psychoanalyst. Okay. Among my patients, patients and analysants, I only have 2 or 3 people on which I can say that it's mental care. Okay, it's because they need some medicines and a few. It's a psychiatric action, I can say, but it's only maybe 3, 4, not more. All the others are either psychoanalysis or psychotherapy. And what I call I say psychotherapy, but I would say, if I want to be clearer, I would say that these are preliminary sessions. These preliminary sessions have a durations of 3 weeks, 1 month, 1 year, 5 years. As long as the person thinks I'm here to cure him, for me it's preliminary sessions. Sometimes the guy might say that okay, I'd better analyze why everything is going wrong for me. Then, in a way, he quits the preliminary session to enter analysis. And for me, it's not the fact that he's sitting or lying on the couch. It depends on his subjective position. If he believes that he needs to be cured, okay, so it's a psychotherapy. But if he has been in another subjective position, then it can turn into psychoanalysis.
What was the question you said that the patient asks?
Say again?
What was the question you said that the patient asks when that transition occurs?
I didn't get what you said.
You stated that the patient asks a sort of rhetorical question. What do you remember what you said? When it shifts to psychotherapy to psychoanalysis?
I thought it was a claim. I better analyze where everything is going wrong for me.
Oh yeah. Yeah. Well, it's very different to say I'm really depressed, and it's very different to say that and to say. Whatever I do, I always fall in the arms of women who are bitches. My kids, they insult me. My boss is a pain in the ass. And how is it possible? I always get into these schemes. Okay, very good. Talk to me about that. You know, it's very different. Oh, I'm so depressed, you know, it's maybe you could give me a pill, that would be better. Okay, very good. because you, excuse me, just 1 second. Because when you receive a patient, you are, I think we have always to grab him by the very tip of his transference. Not whatever it is, but and because he has usually a fake knowledge about what psychoanalysis is, of course, and so it's important to start where he belongs. What did you want to say?
I was just thinking, you know, when you work in the community mental health care system, or I worked for a few years for the city department of mental health, and now all the charting is computerized, and it seems like the lying that you do about what you're doing in the hour is very overt. So you might do something that's psychotherapy. I mean, it's not psychoanalysis, but you might do something that's relational talk therapy, but then you go to check in these boxes in the form, and it's like symptoms reduced this hour. Like,
poor people. You're not very lucky.
So it requires a kind of overt deception. And I was just thinking in terms of these two discourses, is there kind of within this structure that's very controlling and dominating, is there a kind of radical positionality that we can take up that's different than just pure deception or...
Deception.
There's always a truth in fiction. When I was in community mental health, I felt my career creative writing skills more than anything else.
Right.
But I think deception is a part of psychoanalysis process anyway. It has to be deceiving in a way or another. As we said before, the situation is hopeless but not serious.
I don't want to get too far from the question that you raised, which is why here you medicalize or scientificize the problem, but of psychoanalysis. But I was intrigued by something you said early on in your short lecture that I've never heard, which is the master has no fantasy.
Oh yeah. I think it's very important. It's very important, of course. I don't have actual examples, but I'm pretty sure I heard that in many films or some masters saying all these romance, all this is for women. It's not for me. All this literature. We had a great president called Nicolas Sarkozy in France. We were very lucky to have this guy. He said it's not a very famous book that he's taught in high school called La Princesse de Clèves, whatever. I haven't read it, but it's very well known. It's romantic, and he said we should stop. There is no reason to teach that to children, no, to teenagers. Why do you teach that? It's not worth. No fantasy.
His wife was a big fan of psychoanalysis.
What psychoanalysis did she went through? Jesus Christ. Do you really believe she would have stayed with this guy if she had been through psychoanalysis?
What does it mean to say the master has no fantasy? I'm not.
Think about the diagram for the discourse of the master.
Okay.
And if you look at it, the underlying truth of the master's discourse is the divided subject.
Right.
In a way, he is in denial or blind to his own division.
Mm-hmm.
What he enjoins the counterpart to do is utilize their knowledge to produce something. It is a consequence of the counterpart's production. In the diagram, there is, if you look at where the objet is placed, there's no linkage in the diagram between the position of the agent and its product. So that, to go back to the movie 12 Years a Slave, slaves in the South were used to grow cotton. They had to know how to plant it, how to weed it, how to prune it, how to know when the cotton was harvestable, what balls of cotton to leave on the plant, what to take, how to bale it and package it to be shipped to market. And all the slave owner cared about was how much profit were they making. He had no way of knowing anything about any of that process. And in that sense, his goal was not the enjoyment of the production of cotton, but to siphon off the excess value, like a value-added tax, and keep that for himself and use it for some other purpose. Usually, I mean, in the States, in this country, if you look at the Koch brothers, they're each individually worth over $45 billion. They could spend each $1 million a day from now to the time you could reasonably assume them to be dead.
There's a movie about that too.
They will not have touched a fraction of their fortune, but they are still out there wanting to make more money. For what purpose? It's kind of like, it makes me think of the Rat Man. You know, let's go out and collect more turds. What good are the turds? It's not like,
So it's the unconscious fantasy. So they have to be blind to the unconscious fantasy. So it's like a evangelical Christian has to censor everything outside of the Master's Discourse. Is that what you're kind of?
yeah.
It has
There
to be
is a
censored.
fantasy. So there is a fantasy, but it's censored.
To say.
There's this enormous investment.
Yeah, and it's not to be, it may be, okay. I have believe it or not, I have another friend, who, when we were young men together growing up in Detroit, he always wanted a 67 Corvette.
Who wouldn't?
Yeah, we're trying to get one now. But this has been his goal in life, is to get that black with the gray interior Corvette he saw the guy in the hood had. And it's like, it's something that exists for him, that it gets him to salivate over catalogs, he watches shows about restoration. I mean, it's something that keeps, there is something that I would have to say it's wet with his enjoyment. Whereas if I think about a capitalist, I mean, the most, from our childhood, it's the best image is Scrooge McDuck. Donald Duck and his nephews had the Uncle Scrooge, who used to love to go jump in his vault and swim in his gold coins. But that was not a wet fantasy. It wasn't like he was going to, it's not like my friend with the fantasized Corvette, because my friend can imagine himself someday having it and enjoying the thing in and of itself. How do you enjoy paper? How do you enjoy gold coins? What do you do with it?
Fantasy is regarding to Lacan, is the connection, the possible connection between a subject and an object of desire. Okay? When I say possible connection, means that it can be there and not there. When it joins, the Corvette is his, but then it opens again, and the switch. It's the junction between the subject and the objects of desire is, as John mentioned earlier, is like a switch. It can be open or closed.
Right.
That's what Lacan figured as a diamond. Okay? When it's open, it's like a switch open. There is no connection between fantasy and between subject and object. But when the switch is closed, there is a match. Oh, that's exactly what I wanted. Okay?
The match has to occur between a subject and an object he lacks.
Yes, but that he lacked, but that suddenly he has in front of his eyes. And of course, it's going to be a failure later, but for a short time, it's going to be the solution. Just like a woman who goes to the hairdresser, she asks for something. She looks with the guy, and she says, "Well, that's exactly what I wanted." Okay, so there is a matching between a subject. There is a resolution of her fantasy, but usually when she wakes up the next morning, she looks in a mirror and says, "Well, actually, this should have been a bit shorter, or this a bit longer," and it doesn't fit anymore.
That happens in all of my fantasies.
Yeah, sure. Sure, this is the
Otherwise
structure.
you'd be psychotic.
This is the structure of fantasy. It is open or closed. It's closed for a very short while, and then it's open again and doesn't fit.
So what about for Koch? It's not open or closed?
For the what?
For the millionaire, for the billionaire? How is it different? It's not open or closed?
No, it's always open. It's always open. In the discourse of the master, there is no connection. It's like the switch being always open, and there is no interest in any fantasies or romanticism or literature or whatever, and that is the possession of the slave, not the master. It is the slave who has access to the discourse and the knowledge.
So what does it mean the switch is always open? I don't break that down.
Think of a light switch. If the light switch is open, the lights are off. No current flows.
You have to close the circuit.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's
And when you have that thing for just that instant, the woman with her hairstyle, and you find who you think is going to be your perfect lover. My friend gets his Corvette. That's how long it's closed for. For that moment, there's your sons. And then it's open again because all the flaws come up. If it's always never enough, you think somebody who always is chasing after wealth, it's never enough. The things they're able to buy with the wealth are never enough. They always have to get more.
Mm-hmm.
What about the master's fantasy for progeny?
For?
Progeny. Children.
Oh. Don't know. Maybe it's just to transmit his heritage and to master his children. Look at the best example is what's his name? John Fitzgerald Kennedy's father.
Yeah.
He made a lobotomy on her daughter. On one of her daughter had a lobotomy because she was not in the themes he had decided. Oh, he had fantasies. His fantasies were that he wanted to have one of his sons to be president of the United States.
But he died.
But he died. But they all died.
But the oldest son died nobly.
Yeah. What'd you say?
Died nobly.
Yeah, as a military, as a hero in a plane or something. Yeah.
And then the other brothers never had a chance.
Yeah, and the daughter who was the only one who was a bit funny, and so she had a lobotomy. Yeah.
And it was the mother who was really crazy.
Yeah, sure.
Well, we're talking about discourse, right, on the level of consciousness. It's not that the master doesn't have fantasies, but the master is convinced that they don't, right? I mean, this is, otherwise, are we saying that the master is of a perverse structure of some kind?
I think you have many kinds of masters and owners of this position. No, I think it's more structural than that. It is when you draw it the way Lacan drew it. It's there is a cut. It doesn't. There is no connection between the subject and the object. He is the object of his production. He has, in a way, as he is always producing his objects, he has no way to have access as his object as a fantasy. He uses the strength of his slaves to produce this object.
Well, he makes himself into an object in a way, doesn't he?
He what?
He makes himself into an object in a way. By being the master, he wants to become the object of the other's fantasy. And
Sure, I can say that. It's very funny what you're saying, because in a way, on his point of view, we can be sure that he believes that his slaves are objects. Although actually, who has the knowledge and who has the ability to speak, not to speak about the weather, but to speak about the condition, is the slave. Who is, and for the slave, in a way, we can say in a way that the master is an object. You know, like an object. Yeah, like something that's the nuisance. A nuisance is an object. Yeah, that's very interesting. And that is totally unknown by the master, of course. Think of the purloined letter. Who has the speech? Who has the discourse? It's not the king. It's not the police. Although they have all the power, but they're dumb. It's a good example of the position of the discourse of the master, the purloined letter.
so have you thought about this question that you're posing to us?
I'm still expecting answers. No, I don't know. I've been doing that for more than 12 years, and I don't know so far. It's so bizarre, so bizarre. I think it has something to do with, I don't know, what to think of a country where on the radio you can't say shit or fuck. What do you think of this? Jesus Christ. You can't say that. You can't say that. You hear beep. If you're on the radio, you can't say, you have a list of 10 words that it's totally forbidden to say, and if you say that, the radio station is going to pay $20,000 or more. Yeah, what can you do with this?
It's always been a big country in terms of censorship.
But it's okay to somebody getting shot or zombies eating your flesh.
Yeah.
I was mentioning earlier, in the film, the series for Fox, 24. In 24, it's funny, they never use rude words, not a single time, but they can torture. So you can torture in front of kids, you can watch that on TV, no problem, but they cannot hear any of the F words.
But that's an advance. That's an advancement here. If you see the movie that came out on Hitchcock, they couldn't tell it either. Now you can control.
Yeah, but don't you think they could do better? Hitchcock, what was that? Was it Vertigo? The longest kiss in history, or I don't, you know that it's a challenge that Hitchcock had to kiss a woman, and the guy would kiss on the lips, but longer than was allowed by the censorship. Mm-hmm. So they kiss, and after 3 seconds they move back and they say one word, and they kiss again, move more. So they never reach the total time that was forbidden by censorship. Mm-hmm. Jesus Christ.
I think you bring up a good point. I think this is much larger than just within the realm of psychoanalysis. This function of ideology, you can see it everywhere.
Sure, that's right.
And it seems like it's spreading. It's not, restricted to the United States?
Yeah, sure. It's it depends on countries, nonetheless. Nonetheless, the the fear of sex in the U.S. is not the same in France, for instance, and Italy and Latin countries. It's very different, very different. There is such a jouissance, in these words, in this sex, in the alcohol. It's very different when I go here in a bar. People decide to drink to get drunk. In France, when we eat, we have half a glass of wine, just because we like the taste. Of course, we are championship in alcoholism in France, so I have to moderate what I'm saying. But usually, people like us, we just drink one glass because we like that. It's not to get high, especially high. It's. There is such an investment, such a jouissance, in these things. Oh, it's forbidden to say fuck, wow. You remember it was in the 60s. I don't remember which one was it, A.B. Hoffman or someone who had written fuck on his forehead, and he went to jail for that. Yeah. So we are 50 years later, and it's still forbidden on the radio and TV.
The poem Howl is still considered, one of the most amazing pieces of poetry in American literature because of how many taboos it broke. It laid everything out that no one could speak about.
It's very funny for me when I'm in France. I always listen to NPR on streaming, and in NPR they love to pass some extracts of films, and of course in films they use these words all the time. So for a sequence that lasts maybe 20 seconds, you hear 2, 3, or 4 beeps. What is that? What is that?
But that makes a lot of money.
Yeah, that means a lot of money. Jesus Christ, yeah, that's right.
Because you have a prohibition, and I mean, it's all. What's interesting is it's functioning on psychoanalytic principles. I mean, you've probably seen The Century of the Self and Edward Bernays and all that. And so, yeah. And I think we can understand why these things happen. I think what's more difficult to understand is why nobody cares. Like, we know, but we don't care. It's kind of like a disavowal.
Yeah. I have a friend, Christian, he's French, and US citizen as well. He has been living here for more than 40 years now. And when I tell him that about the beeps, he said, oh, no big deal. No big deal. I say, no, it's very important.
Well, doesn't every culture censor something big?
What I heard 2 or 3 days ago, they said that it's an American guy who knows very well French, and he said in the U.S. we censor sex, and in France you censor politics.
Well, in Argentina, they went through a very lengthy period of military rule and the disappearing of many people. So, something big is being censored that required the kidnapping and murder of a huge number of intellectuals and, people who were not part of this regime. So, it leads me to think that maybe it's better to have sex censored censored rather than the existence of my life.
Oh yeah, sure. Well, yeah, you made well, might be, yeah, but it's better not to have neither one nor the other.
But is it possible to have nothing censored?
Oh well, no. Well, it's a very good question because the only thing that has to be censored is the prohibition of incest. Among human beings, that is what is to be prohibited. That is all. And all what we are talking about are metaphors of this censorship of incest, of course. We are in a good position to affirm this.
But of course, the continuing censorship of dirty words keeps them dirty and keeps the jouissance alive. If we suddenly legalized everything, all the drugs, all the speech, then you'd really have a boring life.
Yeah.
Because it's so clear, even while it's censored, kids do this.
Of course, they're not stupid.
You know, they have an orgy of violating all this.
Yes, there is.
And it gets boring very fast.
There is, there is an interest, very big interest in this use of dirty words.
That's what I wonder. The advertisers, in particular, manipulate this, and I would imagine. Advertisers would be the last ones to try to dissolve censorship,
yes, of course.
Even though it may logically seem it would be to their benefit.
In Roger and Me, you know this film? I am okay. Yeah, a school director wanted to have this film for his pupils, and it had been refused because there is a scene where a woman who has no money, she's raising a rabbit, and she says it can be pet or food, and she's holding a pet or food, and she's holding a rabbit, and she has a club. I said she looks, if no one is on the head of the rabbit. Okay. And this is so violent, that is the reason why the film was forbidden in schools. But the next scene is someone shot in the street. And this is no problem for the kids.
So what we're censoring here is the pretense in the of the psychoanalytic community, the censorship of the pretense that the analyst is occupying the position of the universe, or of the position of the analyst. We're trying to get. I want to come back to what is being censored, which is that this pretense that the analyst is working in the discourse of the analyst in the United States.
I think, if I'll venture my understanding,
Or in the Lacanian community, at least, perhaps. I would say, from my experience with GIFRIC, that would be the censorship. Or what I noticed for myself is that in the hunger for knowledge, I was willing to forego all of my subjective responses to the discourse under the pretense that the knowledge, it was a discourse of the analyst, when in fact it was a discourse of the universe.
I don't think that was the discourse of the university. I think that's the master-slave discourse.
Maybe.
I'm trying to get around back to this major question, however we want to phrase it.
Anyway, to go into what you just said, it's always easier to jump into the discourse of the historic, the university or master, The discourse of the analyst is very narrow. It's an edge, you know, and it's so satisfying to go in the other discourses that it's always a temptation. Even when you work as an analyst, what of course I'm not, when I listen to Analyst, I'm not always occupying this position. I can shift in the position of the historic or whatever, but it's important to be aware of these shiftings during because then you are in a better position to use this shift as some kind of interpretation in the way then you can observe what is the effect of this shift in what the patient, the analyst, is going to say.
You can't always stay on that edge or always following into one of the other discourses.
Yes, of course.
This is important because a subset of us are reading The Direction of Victor, and there's a lot of critique on ego psychology and the direction of what Lacan saw American psychoanalysts doing with the transference. The question came up, okay, so we let the transference emerge, and from the standpoint of the discourse of the analyst, what do you do with that transference?
You mean which transference? Transference of the patient to the analyst or the counter-transference? Which one?
No, the transference of the patient to the analyst.
That's your major tool because look, in the discourse of the analyst, you are going to see that the knowledge is in the position of truth. So the analyst believes that you own the truth of his symptoms. You are the person who is supposed to know. And this is what you are going to use, or this is what your analyst is going to use. Oh, I imagine that you that you are going to think that since I said this, okay, toward the end of psychoanalysis is when there is going to be a drop of this position. Well, finally, I thought he knew that much, but it's not true. Finally, who knows that I know that better than he does? Okay, the fall of the dump, the fall of the subject who supposedly knows about my symptom. Okay, this is the fall. Okay, and this is the resolution of some kind of transference. But transference is based upon this thought of that the analyst has the proper knowledge about my symptoms.
So in the face of this, if you are working with somebody and their transference is towards you, and they're coming on very strongly, presuming you're thinking this, you're thinking that, the position of the analyst in the analytic discourse would simply be to be curious.
To be
curious, to get the patient to elaborate their own fantasy of that transferential relationship.
Yes, of course. Oh, you tell me more.
A knowledge to you, so the issue is what's the disowned? Well, I guess it's what's the disowned knowledge?
What is?
The disowned knowledge. So it could be that they're owning a knowledge that you have, so that the analyst has a subject supposed to know has. But is that, what's the remainder of that exactly? it isn't clear what the remainder of that is until it falls. It's
I think there is always a reminder. Just as when I'm talking to you, I suppose you understand as what I'm saying. And if I have the feeling that you understand something very different from what I've said, that I'm going to change my discourse. So it's a common process, I believe. It has not to be totally eradicated.
I want to ask you a question, Alan. Do you carry malpractice insurance?
yes.
Why?
Why?
What is it?
I don't know, because I don't do what I'm supposed to do to protect myself.
Exactly. and that's the whole
So I don't have a good answer for that. Yeah.
Because it's cheap.
What?
Because it's cheap.
It's cheaper than being
It
sued.
assures me of something that isn't true, that I'm protected.
Yeah. Malpractice insurance serves two functions. One, it keeps the state and the insurance companies off your back. But primarily, I think for practitioners, it's some assurance that we won't be responsible if a patient thinks we screwed them up. That we won't have to pay the financial price for a supposed mistake or error on our part, whether or not we've actually made a lapse. And I think it's that kind of reasoning or logic that gets us in training programs, gets us, as you say, trading away your subjective experiences for knowledge you're getting from somebody else. That in some way to actually try and occupy that momentary position where we function as an analyst in somebody else's discourse is a great responsibility. We are the sole agent. We are the one who is responsible for what we do or don't do. And I think in this country, especially, we don't want to take that responsibility on. We want to push it onto somebody else. This isn't what I learned from my experience. I was in a class and the instructor told me that this technique will help you with the problem you're suffering with. So I'm pushing the responsibility for my actions farther and farther away. To the point where I'm not an agent anymore.
Are you pushing the responsibilities, or are you managing the consequences? It seems to me that
But if I do my job well, there shouldn't be any consequences, except if the person's going to end. The person who is sitting in the chair / lying on the couch is going to end up with a different understanding of their life and their world, and hopefully have a degree of freedom more than they had before we started, so they can make different choices. They may not like the scales falling from their eyes, but they're coming to have the scales fall from their eyes. So if you take that position as I am the agent, I am the one responsible, I am the one who is or is not taking an action to intervene in your discourse. If you take that position of agency, you accept the responsibility. If you're in the discourse of the analyst, if you're in the discourse of the university, it's always pushed off to some other master. Freud said, in this article, Lacan said, I went to this seminar and the teacher said this. It's always pushed to the side. It's not a managing of consequence. It's more a deflection of agency, of really being willing to be present and responsible with what you're doing in the moment. And none of us want to be in that place. We would much rather be the infant who mom and dad are smiling upon in our wonderfulness just because we share our diapers. We don't want any more responsibility than that. But part of what to take this path demands in a certain way is that we look at the ways We want to deflect responsibility, which comes out in countertransference stuff.
But I think what's missing from this conversation is the discourse of the capitalist and a properly Marxist analysis, because all these things that we're poo-pooing are highly profitable
Oh, yeah.
object odds.
Yeah.
And there's no other way. There's no other system. That's all we can think of. So what are we going to do about that? How do we encounter that? What sort of questions do we develop from that perspective?
That's sort of what I mean by managing the consequences. It's sort of like, Nathan's going to be hopefully taking his MFD exam soon. I remember when I took my MFD exams, and what a small percentage of questions on the exams apply to what I actually do in the room. In fact, many are very counter to what we actually do with patients. And Alan mentored me during that process and actually said, is this about you're getting into the mind of the people to be able to determine what they need you to say to get this thing? But the consequences of practicing without a license are huge.
Yeah.
So I don't want to bear the consequences. Neither do I think that the answers were particularly ones that I believe. But I'm not stupid. I know something about how to get this thing called license so that I'm not sued for practicing psychotherapy without one. There is something here about, if you're working within the system and you know how that system operates, there's a lot of tongue-in-cheek use of the system. Maybe it's stupid, but if I want to avoid being sued by a patient who, an eating disordered patient, what it's going to come down to in the legal thing is, can I show that this is within my scope of practice? So I might have to take a course or two in eating disorders, teaching nothing that I would actually use with any patient. But this little CE document that shows that I've taken these courses in eating disorder will convince the legal system that I know what I'm doing.
You have the appropriate imprimatur.
I know how to work the system. And the system requires work.
The question then becomes how not to let the system work humanly.
Sure. And I'm pretty sure there are means. We have invented in France and many means, and I really can't imagine that you cannot invent means as well. There's no reason for it. No reason.
Well, the reason is living well, satisfied with pleasures. Living in a nice home, having access to all sorts of distractions. I mean, that's what. So why would we be driven to change anything when we are living so comfortably?
My dear, I have a pretty nice life in Paris as well. I have a beautiful house, a nice woman, and I'm coming here, and my life could be worse.
My life is very comfortable too. I think this is something I think about a lot, though. It's like I think capitalism allows us to sort of quote Winnicott, to go on being capitalists. It's like
He didn't say that.
no, to make a play on what he said. But I think it's very difficult to be motivated to really come up with these questions, to really take on these issues. And people have been doing it since, for the whole century. We have theories, we have other forms, like you were pointing out before in these other Latin American countries. There's something else, I think, that's at work here that's, I don't know what else to call it but disavowal, and I think it's a serious problem.
I think a big problem, or maybe it's not a problem, is I have yet to meet a psychoanalyst of any persuasion who would jump at the chance to be responsible in a way outside of the institute insurance protective circle. All I've heard from any psychoanalyst, for example, is how impossible it is to even have any clue or idea what the cure is. No way to tell whether the patient is getting better or not. So I hear an invitation to a different kind of ethic that I have no confidence that any analyst I know would willingly partake of it. I get the sense that analysts, and this includes Lacanians, would like to talk as if there is just no way that analyst is a catch-as-can process, it's serendipity. We use the example of Lacan and Lacan and the limitations of language, and you can't really say or mean anything in totality. You use it as a kind of excuse to get off the accountability bandwagon completely. There's just, often accompanied by a giggle or two. There's just no way. How can you say there's a way to decide? And so what I see really hurting psychoanalysis is this, really phobia of being accountable in any way and calling all that a discourse of the master or something authoritarian or capitalistic. And I have no idea how to make that any better. Really, psychoanalysis is a very unwatched occupation. It's like sex or going to the bathroom. Nobody's supposed to, there's all this confidentiality. Nobody's supposed to be looking in or looking out. So, to me, I feel a little bit I pity, these governmental institutions. What are they supposed to do? They work with a little bit that the professionals are willing to allow.
Well, to consider psychoanalysis as a private practice, that seems to be normal to me, because it's the encounter between an analysant and an analyst, and this is not it is private to these two people, I think. It has not to be disclosed in any way.
Then how is the patient supposed to be protected?
It's not a patient, it's an analysant. He comes to analyze how he's dealing with his life. He's not curing his...
Still a human.
Yeah, sure. Yeah. That's what he is a human and a subject, and not a patient. If he is a patient and he wants to be cured, he goes to see a psychotherapist or a medic or a psychiatrist or whatever. We are talking about something very different. We are talking about someone who thinks he is not dealing with his life in a way that is correct for him, and that's another position. He has not to be protected. and against that, it is full unprotection that he is going to reach with psychoanalysis. Because so far he is protected by what? By his symptoms. His symptoms are protecting him. And he might get rid of a few of his symptoms. Therefore, he's going to be very much more fragile. You know what Lacan said? Because he said that he started to have some patients before war. And he said that some of his patients went to war, and he said that the only one who came back and were not insane were the one who were not cured, who were still neurotic. The one who were cured came back totally nuts.
So what I hear you saying is there's no need for any question of accountability in this very special relationship.
Accountability? I mean, to third? No, of course.
For the analyst, the professional.
No, it's between the analyst and the analysant.
Yes. Okay, I get you.
Yeah, and you mentioned earlier.
I don't like it, but I get it.
Yeah, sure, I like it. I think it's important because that's the. And you mentioned the insurance. The funny thing in France is that when you're a medical doctor, you have to have insurance for civil responsibility, professional responsibility in case of problem. And if you're a surgeon, you're going to pay that. If you are a pediatrician, you pay that and that. You have different prices, very, very different. I don't know the ratio, but maybe it's 1,000 the ratio on the maximum and minimum. And you know who pays the least? The psychiatrist. I pay really nothing. Because they know that there is never a problem with psychiatrists in France.
Well, the liability is, at least in this country, the liability is pushed off onto the pharmacology companies, the pharmaceutical companies. You can prescribe something that, the person has a bad reaction on the pill. You didn't make the pill.
Insurance and psychiatry are very close bedmates in this country.
Yeah.
No, it's a very radical edge, and the satisfactions come sometimes, but not always. Sure.
Well, it makes it a very insulated
Sure.
kind of project.
Sure, absolutely.
Which I distrust on principle. To me, I think it breeds secrecy and self-protection and not a healthy breathing space. And I see corruptions of it in quite a few cases.
Sure, corruption too,
Among
of
people
course.
who
Of course.
talk a very good line, but I wouldn't trust it as far as I could throw them.
I don't think trust is mandatory. I don't think so. I don't think trust. I don't trust. Not at all. It's a faith. Trust is based on faith, and I don't believe so much in faith.
Gets you off a lot of hooks.
Huh?
It gets you off a lot of hooks.
Yeah, sure. Hooks. Yeah, sure.
But that's part of your pleasant life.
Sure.
Ours too.
Absolutely.
Very hard to hook up a psychoanalyst here to any kind of accountability.
Say again?
I say it's very hard in this culture to hook up a psychoanalyst to any kind of accountability. Even with the insurance and the overseers and the BBS and all the initials. Because because we say this
I
is so
think-
special, it's so different what we do, it doesn't fit in any paradigm.
I think it's a very important question, the question of responsibility. I think it's the analysant who is responsible for his life and for what he says and for his choices. And if he chooses an analyst who is a pervert, who is a nuisance,
Menace.
huh?
A menace.
A menace, absolutely. I think it's important to see what is the responsibility of the analysant not to have detected this through what the analyst had said and his attitude. And therefore, I think even if he's a menace or if he's a pervert, there is something to analyze. And if this person spends, would say, 1 year with this analyst, after 1 year, the person says, Jesus, I was blind. This guy is a pain. This guy is dangerous. I had not seen that in the way he was acting. But if I don't have seen that in him, I haven't seen that in many other people too. But now my eyes are more open, and now when I'm going to meet people who are pervert in the same way, I'm going to detect that. And beforehand, I did not detect that. Therefore, I made a part of analysis with this analyst, nonetheless.
I think your point would be much more grounded if not for the, I think, quite widespread manipulation of the transference, which over and over makes it quite tricky.
Sure.
Even maddening for an analysant.
But what is the
responsibility?
Sure, but what is the responsibility of the analysant? I think that has to be questioned, and this is what is in question in psychoanalysis. Say, okay, I'm doing mess, I'm getting in many problems, but what is my responsibility? What is my blindness? And I'm going to question my blindness. And when someone says that to his analyst, the analyst can say, well, now he is in analysis. He's starting his analysis.
But you're a perverted analyst and you're...
He can quit. He can quit. When he noticed that, he can quit.
He can quit.
Yes, he has the responsibility.
I think you're overlooking the power of an analyst's manipulation of a transfer.
Sure, that can happen.
That's what I'm saying. There's no accountability for, really, without these institutions that nobody has a good word for, including me.
I'm sorry, I need to leave. So sorry.
Okay, maybe we're gonna finish now. Huh? It's a long.
Unless we want some.
There's dessert.
And some final anything, or
Yeah,
I just
apple pie.
wondered what we hope is going to come out. What maybe Jacques and John are hoping is going to come out of this, or. But Cynthia, you can send it, sure, yeah.
Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
I would love to know that.